This is going to be our video for Unit 1, Base 6. And this is going to be our last video before the test. Tomorrow in class we'll be reviewing for the full class, and then the day after that will be the test. This is going to be our last video of actual new notes before our test. So what we're building up towards, what we're trying to do with this lesson is we're trying to go back and forth between numbers and words. As you get into Math 2, you're going to be dealing a lot more with word problems, so it's good to be able to go back and forth between numbers, equations, and expressions, and regular sentences. So first thing that's helpful to do is go through some different operations, different symbols, and what they mean if you just say them out, different words associated with our operations. So I'll start with addition. So we add two numbers. Technical math term for that, for adding numbers, is a sum. However, there's some other terms that we often associate with addition. You say it out loud, a lot of times you'll say plus. I say more. A lot of times in class I'll say and. Where you might hear give involved in a word problem, meaning you're adding. So there's a lot of different words. This isn't all of them. This is just some words that you see that might mean addition. We have also some words that go with subtraction. So again, when we subtract numbers in math, we call that a difference. However, there are a lot of other words that will also mean subtraction. So again, we say it out loud. A lot of times we say minus. We also use words like less, take away, any words like that. I mean, we're losing value. Alright, that means subtract. Same idea with multiplication. So again, when we multiply numbers in math, we call that a product. But we have some other words that also mean multiplication. I have words like times is what we usually say out loud. 4 times 3. Also, a lot of times in class you hear me say by. A lot of times that refers to area. 3 by 4 square rectangle. We also hear factors or multiples. A lot of times that is referring to multiplication as well. I just have a bunch of words associated with that operation. And we have the same thing for division also. Again, we have a technical term we divide in math. It's called a quotient. We have a bunch of other words that are associated with that. So a lot of times with fractions we'll say over, 3 over 4, 5 over 10. So that means division. And also if we cut into a certain number of pieces, that means division. Per is another one that means division. And also, since fractions are talking about division, right, that bar on a fraction represents division. Anytime we see anything about a ratio, that means division. Right, again, there are other words that mean division. This is just kind of things that relate to this. Think of division. We also have some words that relate to our symbols, our equal symbol. Alright, if we see this phrase is equal to, same thing, it is greater than, or is less than. So for equals, a lot of times you'll see is in a problem. So is a lot of times means equals, or it might say makes as well, or it might say equivalent. Words like this representing equal, something is equal to something else. Alright, the key here is we have to look for that is, though. Alright, these symbols will only pop up if we have the is. It has to be a full sentence to have one of these equations or inequalities involved. So is greater than, we're looking for something like more than, and if we have a greater than or equal to, right, another way to describe that is to say at least. And again, there are different ways of expressing that. That's just two examples. Same thing with less than. Sometimes we see smaller than, and with less than or equal to, instead of at least, we see at most. But there are other words that describe that same thing. So these aren't the only ones. This is just kind of giving you an idea. Right, and in class what we did is we went through and we generated this list on our own. So we had some different ones in class. When you get back to class, maybe take a look at some other people's notes and see if there's some ones that we didn't get up here. So last thing is a number. Alright, so when it says a number, it doesn't tell you what that number is. That's talking about a variable. If you don't know what that number is, doesn't tell you what that number is, we're going to put down a variable. Alright, so you can use X or you can use any other letter you want to. Alright, so here we go with our first sentence translation. So what I'm going to do is circle some of these words we've been talking about. So here we see product, that's something we've talked about. A number, something we just talked about. And there's is, that's also in there. So product means I'm going to be talking about multiplication. Alright, a number means it's a variable, so I can pick whatever I want. So let's call it Q. Is means equals. Alright, and there's 9. That starts our sentence. So 9 times Q equals 63. Alright, so this is what we like to call a number sentence. Alright, we translate it, and what it really is saying in number sentence is we're talking about an equation. Right, an equation or an inequality. So this back page here has a bunch for you to practice. So you can get some practice working both forwards on the stop section and then backwards on the bottom section, where you're going to be taking the number sentence and writing a word sentence to describe that. So the last thing we're going to talk about today is decimals and percents, and going back and forth between decimals, percents, and fractions. So we like to use decimals, like to use percents, to do what's called proportional reasoning, understand how big numbers are in relation to other numbers. So when we talk about a percent, that represents a portion out of 100. When we talk about a decimal, while we're really talking about the same proportion, what we're talking about is a portion out of 1 for a decimal instead of out of 100 for a percent. Alright, so move decimal to percent. What we're talking about is getting 100 times bigger. So instead of out of 1, we're talking about out of 100. Alright, so instead of 0.28, that would be 28%. 0.07, 7%. 0.003 would be 0.3%. And 1 as a decimal would be 100%. Alright, says you who follow sports, a decimal would be like a batting average in baseball. Alright, so it's a decimal, and it's representing the percentage of times where a batter gets a hit. So what's our shortcut here? What's the pattern that we're following? 0.28 becomes 28%, 0.07 becomes 7%, 0.003 becomes 0.3%, and 1 becomes 100%. What we're seeing is that we're not changing the numbers. All we're doing is we're moving the decimal point. Alright, how many places are we moving that decimal point? We're moving it 2 places. Which direction are we moving it? We're moving it to the right. Alright, so that's how we're going to go from a decimal to percent. So we're really just moving the decimal 2 places to the right. Alright, and mathematically this is the same also as saying we're going to multiply by 100. Alright, going percent to decimal, we're going to see the same thing. Alright, go 35%, 0.35, 10%, 0.1 or 0.10, 5% would be 0.05, right? 0.4%, just like up there on the first example, be 0.004. Alright, so again, same kind of thing. Our numbers aren't changing. All we're doing is we're moving the decimal point. And again, we're moving it 2 places. The difference this time is we're moving it to the left. So that's the difference for percent to decimal, moving it to the left. Alright, again, moving it 2 places to the left. Mathematically, what that means is that we're dividing by 100. This is the last piece here, and then we're going to get to, unless you have some time practicing doing this on your own. So now we're going from a fraction to percent. Once we get from a fraction to percent, we can go to decimal, right, just by using that shortcut. So fraction to percent, how do we do that? So first thing is we think about what a percent means. A percent is some portion that we don't know out of 100. Alright, so that's going to be our first step, is set up a proportion out of 100. Alright, second thing we're going to do is called cross multiplying, and we're going to do a little more of this once we get to unit 4 in this class, but right now this will be the only time we use cross multiplying. So I'm going to do is multiply 10 up here by x, equal sign, 6 by 100. Right, the last thing we're going to do is divide by a number in front of x if there is one. Alright, and this number in front of x, the vocabulary term we have for that is called a coefficient. So here's our second step after we cross multiplied. Here's going to be our third step. Last step is going to be to divide by this coefficient of 10. 600 divided by 10, again, we cancel out the zeros, we get 60. Alright, so this is the same as 60%. Right, as a decimal, we'd move it 2 places to the left, it'd be 0.6. So the rest of these I'm going to let you practice on your own. Again, this is going to be the last neat thing we do. Tomorrow we'll be reviewing for the test, and the day after that we'll actually take the test. So make sure on the back of this there's a lot of practice problems. Make sure you try a few of every section. Make sure you're comfortable with all the different conversions to decimal percent, percent to decimal, fraction to percent, and fraction to decimal.